The morning sun had barely risen when Rebecca Chen walked through the heavy red doors of Station 47 for the first time as chief. She carried a single cardboard box with her belongings and a leather folder containing her official appointment letter. The firehouse smelled like coffee, diesel fuel, and decades of history. She knew what was coming. She'd known since the moment the mayor announced her promotion 3 weeks ago. The whispers had already started back then, spreading through every station in the city like wildfire. First female chief in the department's 150-year history. Too young at 38. Never worked at this particular station. An outsider. The common room fell silent when she entered. 12 firefighters sat scattered across worn couches and folding chairs, some reading newspapers, others scrolling through their phones. All of them looked up. All of them measured her with their eyes. "Good morning," Rebecca said, keeping her voice steady and clear. "I'm Chief Chen. I know this is a change, and change isn't always comfortable, but I'm here to work alongside you, to learn from your experience, and to make this department safer and stronger." A few nods, mostly blank stares. One older firefighter in the back stood up and walked out without a word. The door slammed behind him. Rebecca had expected worse, honestly. She'd spent 15 years clawing her way up through the ranks, working twice as hard as anyone else just to be considered half as good. Every promotion came with the same resistance, the same doubts, the same tests. She'd passed them all. This would be no different. "Chief," said a tall man in his 50s, standing near the coffee maker. His uniform shirt was perfectly pressed. His gray hair cut military short. 3 decades of service medals decorated his chest. Deputy Chief William Torres. "We weren't expecting you until 8. "I like to get an early start," Rebecca replied, extending her hand. He shook it, his grip firm and measuring. "So we see. I'd like to do a walkthrough of the station, meet everyone on shift, review our current protocols. Can you help me with that?" "Of course." His tone was professional but cold, like he was speaking to a visiting inspector rather than his new boss. "Though I should mention we've been running things pretty smoothly around here for a long time. Our response times are excellent, our safety record is solid. We know what works, the message was clear. We don't need you to fix anything because nothing's broken." "I'm sure you do," Rebecca said. "I'm looking forward to learning from what you've built here." The morning passed in a blur of introductions and tours. The engine bay with its gleaming trucks. The equipment room with walls of gear organized to the inch. The sleeping quarters upstairs where firefighters caught rest between calls. The kitchen where the crew shared meals like a family. Rebecca absorbed it all, asked questions, listened more than she spoke. But she felt the wall between her and the crew. They were polite, professional even, but distant. When she walked into a room, conversation stopped. When she left, they started again. She was an outsider, and they were making sure she knew it. By afternoon, most of the crew had gathered in the common room for a break. This was clearly the heart of the station, the place where the real bonding happened. Mismatched furniture, a TV mounted on the wall playing a basketball game on mute, photos of past crews covering every available space. And in the far corner, nearly hidden behind a pile of equipment catalogs and old gear, sat an upright piano. Rebecca noticed it immediately. The wood was scratched and faded, the keys yellowed with age. Someone had draped it with an old station flag, and a row of trophies from interdepartment competitions sat along the top. It looked like it hadn't been played in years. Deputy Chief Torres caught her looking at it. Something shifted in his expression. A slight smile, but not a friendly one. "That old thing's been here since the station opened in 1962, he said, loud enough that everyone in the room could hear. Battalion chief back then thought firefighters needed culture or something. Paid for it himself. "Does anyone play?" Rebecca asked. "Not anymore. Had a guy about 10 years back who knew a few songs. Mostly it just sits there collecting dust and memories." Torres walked over to the piano, running his hand across the dusty lid. The room had gone quiet again, but this time it felt different. Anticipatory. Rebecca realized that others were watching Torres, waiting for something. "You know, Chief," Torres said, still looking at the piano, "I did some reading about you after they announced your appointment. Impressive resume. Degrees in fire science and emergency management. Incident command certifications. Published papers on urban firefighting strategy. You're quite the accomplished woman." "I've worked hard," Rebecca said carefully, sensing a trap. "Indeed you have." Torres turned to face her fully now, and his smile had widened. I even read that you have a minor in music from college. Is that right? That's right. Well then. Torres gestured toward the piano like a game show host revealing a prize. Since you're such a Renaissance woman, and since we're all getting to know each other today, maybe you could play something for us. Show us you're not just book smart but well-rounded. The room erupted in chuckles and a few low whistles. Rebecca understood immediately what was happening. This was the test, the one she hadn't anticipated. Torres was trying to embarrass her in front of the entire crew, betting that her music minor meant she could maybe plunk out a simple tune. He wanted to make her look foolish, to show that all her credentials didn't translate to real-world skills. I tell you what, Torres continued, his voice dripping with mock friendliness. If you can actually play that piano, really play it, not just chopsticks or happy birthday, I'll quit right here and now. I'll walk out that door and retire early. The room erupted. Firefighters laughed, slapped their knees, nudged each other. This was entertainment. The new chief getting knocked down a peg on her first day. A few of the younger firefighters looked uncomfortable, like maybe Torres had gone too far, but no one spoke up. Rebecca stood very still, her mind racing. She could refuse, but that would look weak. She could try to deflect with humor, but Torres had boxed her in. She could attempt to play something simple and prove his point that she was out of her depth. Or she could do something else entirely. That's quite an offer, Deputy Chief Torres, she said quietly. But we've got a department to run, and I've got a lot to learn in my first few days here. How about we focus on that instead? Come on, Chief, Torres pressed, sensing victory. Just a few notes. Unless you can't actually play? Maybe later, Rebecca said, picking up her folder from a nearby table. Right now I need to review our response protocols and meet with the other shifts. Torres, I'd like you in my office in 30 minutes to go over the training schedule. She walked out of the room with her head high, even as laughter followed her down the hallway. Behind her, she could hear Torres accepting congratulations from the crew, his voice booming. All credentials, no substance, someone said. Rebecca closed the door to her new office and sat down at the desk. She opened her folder but didn't see the words on the page. Instead, she saw piano keys, heard music in her memory, felt the ghost of pain in her left hand. They didn't know. None of them knew. And for now, she thought maybe that was better. She had work to do, trust to build, and respect to earn through actions, not performances. The piano could wait. Rebecca's first week at Station 47 passed in a careful dance of authority and patience. She arrived early every morning, stayed late reviewing reports, and made herself visible during every shift change. She learned names, asked about families, and listened to stories about calls that had gone wrong and ones that had gone right. Slowly, a few firefighters began to warm up to her. Others remained distant, loyal to Torres and his quiet campaign of resistance. But every time she entered the common room, her eyes found the piano. And every time someone would make a joke about it, Torres had turned his challenge into a running gag, a daily reminder that their new chief had backed down from his dare. What none of them knew was that every evening, after Rebecca left the station and drove to her small apartment across town, she sat at her own piano. The one possession she'd kept through every move, every promotion, every new start. Her fingers would rest on the keys and she'd remember. The memories always started the same way. A small hand barely able to span 5 keys, pressing down notes on an old keyboard in a community center basement. She was 5 years old and the sound was magic. Her mother, Linda, worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. Morning shift at a diner, afternoon cleaning offices, evening stocking shelves at a grocery store. They lived in a 2-room apartment where the heating barely worked in winter, and the air conditioning didn't work at all in summer. But Linda never complained. She just worked, saved every penny she could, and made sure Rebecca had what she needed. The community center was free, a safe place for Rebecca to stay while her mother worked. That's where Mrs. Patterson found her, a retired piano teacher who volunteered twice a week. She heard Rebecca humming a melody she'd heard on a commercial, perfectly on pitch, every note exact. "Would you like to learn to play?" Mrs. Patterson had asked. Rebecca nodded, unable to speak because she wanted it so badly. Within months, it was clear that Rebecca wasn't just talented. She was exceptional. Mrs. Patterson called in favors, found her a real piano to practice on at a local church, spent hours teaching her for free. By age 7, Rebecca was playing pieces that students twice her age struggled with. By 8, she was performing with the city's youth symphony. Her mother would sit in the audience of every recital, still wearing her work uniform because she'd rushed straight from her shift. Her face would glow with pride, tears streaming down her cheeks as Rebecca's small fingers brought impossible beauty into the world. When Rebecca was 10, Mrs. Patterson entered her in a regional competition. She won. Then a state competition. She won that too. The prize money helped, but more importantly, doors started opening. Scholarship opportunities, master classes with renowned teachers, invitations to prestigious music programs. At 12 years old, Rebecca Chen became the youngest person ever to win the Van Cliburn Junior Piano Competition. The classical music world took notice. Articles appeared in music magazines calling her a prodigy, the next great American pianist. Talent scouts from elite conservatories contacted her mother. Her future seemed written in gold. The training intensified. 5 hours of practice daily, sometimes more. Her mother cut back to 2 jobs so she could drive Rebecca to lessons with a new teacher, a stern Russian woman named Madame Volkov, who had once performed in concert halls across Europe. Madame Volkov was demanding, sometimes cruel, but she pushed Rebecca to heights she'd never imagined. "You have gift," Madame Volkov would say in her thick accent, "but gift without discipline is nothing. You must sacrifice everything for music." Everything Rebecca sacrificed. She gave up friends, gave up childhood activities, gave up everything except piano and school. Her world became black keys and white keys, sheet music and metronomes, and the endless pursuit of perfection. But she didn't mind. When she played, nothing else mattered. The music flowed through her like breathing. Like her hands knew secrets her mind couldn't explain. By 15, she was performing in professional venues, sharing stages with adult musicians who'd trained their entire lives. Critics wrote glowing reviews. Recordings of her performances circulated among serious music lovers. Major conservatories competed for her commitment. At 16, she was accepted to the Juilliard School with a full scholarship. Her mother cried for a week straight, overwhelmed with joy and pride. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be. Then came the night that destroyed it all. Rebecca was 17 in her senior year of high school, just months away from graduating and moving to New York for Juilliard. She'd been at an evening rehearsal, preparing for a major recital that could have been her stepping stone to an international career. Her mother had worked a double shift and was home alone, finally resting. The fire started in an apartment 3 floors below theirs. Faulty wiring in the walls the investigation would later determine. It spread fast, racing up through the old building like it was made of paper instead of wood and brick. Rebecca got the call during rehearsal. A neighbor, screaming into the phone that their building was on fire, that fire trucks were there, that she needed to come now. She ran, left her sheet music, her bag, everything, just ran through the streets until she could see the smoke rising into the night sky, until she could see the flames consuming the only home she'd ever known. The firefighters wouldn't let her through the barriers. She fought them, screaming for her mother, trying to break past the arms holding her back. She watched the building burn, watched firefighters rush in and out, watched water pour from hoses and do nothing against the inferno. They brought her mother out on a stretcher. Rebecca broke free and ran to her, grabbed her hand. Linda's eyes opened just for a moment. She smiled, tried to say something, but the smoke had destroyed her lungs. She squeezed Rebecca's hand once, then went still. Rebecca didn't remember much after that. She remembered screaming. She remembered trying to run back into the building because nothing mattered anymore, because she wanted to burn too. She remembered firefighters grabbing her, holding her back, and somehow in the chaos her left arm got too close to the flames. The pain was instant and absolute. 3rd-degree burns covered her left forearm and hand. The hospital kept her for weeks. Surgery, skin grafts, infections that nearly killed her. Then months of physical therapy, learning to move fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. The nerve damage was permanent. She could use her hand, could do most normal things, but the fine motor control, the precision required for professional piano, was gone. Her dreams didn't die quickly. They died slowly, painfully over the course of a year. She tried to play through the pain and limitation. Madame Volkov gave her 6 more months of lessons, but they both knew the truth. Rebecca could still play beautifully, could still move people with her music. But she couldn't play at the level required for a concert career. Couldn't execute the impossibly complex passages that separated professionals from everyone else. Juilliard withdrew their scholarship offer, gently suggesting she consider music education instead of performance. Other schools did the same. The critics who had once praised her now spoke of her as a tragedy, a what-could-have-been story. Rebecca was 18 years old, alone in the world, and everything she'd worked for was ashes, but something else had been born in those ashes. During her long recovery, she'd become obsessed with the fire that took everything from her. She read every report, studied every detail. She learned about fire behavior, building codes, prevention systems. She visited firehouses, talked to firefighters, asked endless questions. She realized that fires like hers were preventable, that better codes, better enforcement, better training could save lives. And she realized something else too. The firefighters who'd tried to save her mother, who'd pulled her back from the flames even as she fought them, who'd held her while she screamed and fell apart. They were heroes. Real heroes. She wanted to be one of them. The call came in at 2:30 in the morning on Rebecca's 10th day as chief. She was already awake, reviewing incident reports in her office when the alarm blared through the station. Everyone moved with practiced efficiency, sliding down the pole, pulling on gear, mounting the trucks in under 90 seconds. Warehouse fire. Industrial district. Torres shouted over the noise of the engine. Multiple calls coming in. Sounds big. Rebecca climbed into the command vehicle, her heart pounding the way it always did before a major call. This was it. Her first real test as chief. And it was happening in the middle of the night with a crew that still doubted her. The orange glow was visible 3 blocks away. By the time they arrived, flames were shooting 40 feet into the air from a massive warehouse complex. Black smoke billowed into the sky, lit from within by the fire like some kind of hellish sunrise. Rebecca grabbed her radio and stepped out, her mind already working through the calculations. Wind direction, exposure risk to nearby buildings, water supply, personnel allocation. She'd studied hundreds of fires, written papers about them. But standing here with the heat hitting her face and the roar filling her ears was different from any textbook. 2 other companies had already arrived. Chiefs from stations 23 and 16 were on scene, both senior to Rebecca in years of service. They stood near their vehicles arguing about the approach. "We need to go defensive," Chief Patterson from Station 23 was saying. "Building's a loss. Protect the exposures and let it burn." "Negative," Chief Brooks from Station 16 countered. "I've got reports of a security guard who might still be inside. We go offensive, quick search and rescue, then pull back. You'll risk lives for one possible person. The building's structural integrity is already compromised." Rebecca walked up to them, pulling out her tablet with the building schematics she'd pulled up during the drive. Both chiefs looked at her, surprised. "Chiefs," she said, keeping her voice calm and clear. "This warehouse stores industrial chemicals. Tanks on the east side contain acetone and methanol. If the fire reaches them, we're looking at a major explosion that'll take out everything in a 2-block radius." "How do you know that?" Brooks asked. "I reviewed the hazmat inventory for every industrial site in the district during my first week. The tanks are here." She pointed to the schematic. "We've got maybe 20 minutes before the fire spreads that direction." Patterson frowned. "So what are you suggesting?" "Split strategy. Station 16, you take 2 teams for rapid search and rescue through the west entrance, that's farthest from the worst of the fire. In and out 10 minutes maximum. Station 23, set up a defensive perimeter on the east side, cool those chemical tanks with everything you've got. My crew sets up master streams on the north side to cut the fire's spread. We work all 3 angles simultaneously." The 2 chiefs exchanged glances. Brooks spoke first. "That's a lot of coordination. Command structure needs to be clear." "I'll take overall incident command," Rebecca said. It wasn't a request. "Patterson, you're operations chief for the defensive side. Brooks, you're safety officer for search and rescue. We work together. We communicate constantly and we get everyone home safe. Agreed?" There was a pause. In that moment, Rebecca knew they were deciding whether to accept her authority or push back. The fire roared behind them, eating through the building. "Agreed," Patterson said finally. Brooks nodded. "Let's move." The next 40 minutes were controlled chaos. Rebecca positioned herself where she could see all 3 operations, coordinating via radio, adjusting strategies as conditions changed. Station 16's search team found the security guard unconscious in a ground-floor office and pulled him out. The defensive teams poured thousands of gallons of water onto the chemical tanks, keeping them cool as the fire raged nearby. But the fire was massive, fed by decades of accumulated materials inside the warehouse. Just when Rebecca thought they might have it contained, a section of the roof collapsed, sending a shower of sparks and debris toward the chemical tanks. "Patterson, the west tank is heating up," Rebecca said into her radio. "I need 2 more lines on it now." "We're stretched thin, Chief. If I pull crews from the perimeter, the fire spreads to the next building." Rebecca looked at the scene, her mind racing through scenarios. The next building was a 6-story apartment complex, occupied. If the fire spread there, they'd have a disaster. But if that tank exploded, they'd have deaths for certain. "Hold the perimeter," she decided. "I'm going in." "Chief, negative," Torres's voice came through. "That's not your job. It is today. I need someone who knows exactly where to place the line for maximum effect." "That's me." Before anyone could argue further, Rebecca grabbed a hose line and moved toward the danger zone. She could hear Torres cursing behind her, then his footsteps as he followed. 2 other firefighters from her station joined them. The heat was incredible, even through her protective gear. Rebecca led them to a position between the building and the tanks, a narrow corridor where the water would have maximum impact on cooling the tanks while also slowing the fire's spread. "Here!" she shouted. "Focus the stream right at the base of the west tank." They opened the line, water blasting out with enormous pressure. The steam created instant fog, making it hard to see, hard to breathe even through her mask. Rebecca held position, directing the stream, making micro-adjustments based on the fire's behavior. Then she heard the crack. A support beam in the warehouse, weakened by fire, gave way. Part of the wall started to collapse right above their position. Torres saw it the same instant she did. "Move," he shouted, grabbing her arm. They ran, dragging the hose line with them as tons of brick and metal crashed down exactly where they'd been standing seconds before. The impact sent a wave of sparks and debris outward. Something hit Rebecca's shoulder, spinning her around, but Torres kept pulling her until they were clear. "You okay?" he asked, his face covered in soot behind his mask. "I'm fine. Keep that line on the tank." They repositioned further back, but still close enough to be effective. The other crews adjusted their positions. For 20 more minutes they fought, pouring water onto the fire from every angle, until finally, gradually, the flames began to lose their intensity. By dawn, it was over. The warehouse was a total loss, just a skeleton of blackened steel and collapsed walls. But the chemical tanks were intact. The surrounding buildings were saved. The security guard was in the hospital but alive. And every firefighter went home. Rebecca stood among the ruins as the sun came up, her gear soaked and filthy, her body aching. Chiefs Patterson and Brooks approached her, both looking exhausted. "That was good work, Chief," Patterson said, extending his hand. "Really good work." "Unconventional approach," Brooks added. "But it worked. You saved a lot of lives tonight." Rebecca shook their hands, accepting the praise, but she was already thinking about what they could have done better, faster, safer. Back at the station, the crew was quiet as they cleaned equipment and restocked the trucks. Rebecca went to her office to start the incident report. She'd barely sat down when Torres knocked on her open door. "Chief, got a minute?" "Of course. Come in." He closed the door behind him, which was unusual. For a moment he just stood there, seeming to struggle with something. "That move you made tonight, going in on that line," he said finally. "That was either really brave or really stupid." "Maybe both," Rebecca admitted. "You could have been killed. That wall came down right where we were standing. But we got everyone out safe. That's what matters." Torres nodded slowly. Then something shifted in his expression. "I made some calls after we got back. Talked to some people I know at other departments. Asked about you, your history." Rebecca's stomach tightened. "Here it comes," she thought. "Found out you came up through Station 8 in the South District. Toughest station in the city. You worked there for 5 years, took every dangerous call, never backed down, made lieutenant faster than almost anyone. Then captain. You've run into burning buildings more times than most of us have in our whole careers." "I've done my job," Rebecca said carefully. "More than that, your record is exceptional. Best in the department, if we're being honest." Torres paused. "I also found out about your mother, about the fire." Rebecca went very still. "I'm sorry," Torres said, and his voice was genuine. "I didn't know. If I had known what you went through, what made you join the department." He trailed off, then looked her in the eye. "I've been unfair to you. I let my ego get in the way of seeing who you really are. That challenge with the piano, that was out of line." "It's fine," Rebecca started to say, but Torres held up his hand. "It's not fine. I've been poisoning the crew against you because I was angry I didn't get the promotion. But tonight, watching you work, seeing how you commanded that scene, I realized something. You're not just qualified for this job. You're the right person for it." Rebecca didn't know what to say. This was not the conversation she'd expected. "I'm not asking you to forget it," Torres continued. "I'm just saying I was wrong. And from now on, I've got your back, if you'll have me as your deputy chief." Rebecca stood and extended her hand. "I'd be honored to work with you, Deputy Chief Torres." They shook. And for the first time since she'd arrived at Station 47, Rebecca felt like she might actually belong there. But Torres's next words changed everything. "Though I have to say, the crew's still going to give you grief about that piano until you either play it or tell them why you won't." Rebecca smiled slightly. "Let them talk. We've got work to do." What she didn't say was that the work had gotten harder, because word was spreading through the department about what happened at the warehouse, about the new chief who'd saved the day with unconventional tactics. Some were praising her. Others were saying she'd been reckless, that she'd put her crew at risk for glory, and one of those critics was preparing to file a formal complaint that would force Rebecca's hand in ways she never expected. The formal complaint arrived on Rebecca's desk 3 days after the warehouse fire. She read it twice, her jaw tightening with each word. 3 firefighters from her station, including Torres's nephew Danny, were being suspended for 2 weeks without pay for safety violations during a training exercise. The violations were real. Rebecca had caught them bypassing critical safety checks during a ladder drill, showing off for some probationary firefighters. When she'd confronted them, Danny had laughed it off, said they'd been doing it that way for years. Rebecca had documented everything, followed protocol exactly, and issued the suspensions. Now Danny's complaint, filed with the city's fire commission, accused her of abuse of authority, unfair treatment, and creating a hostile work environment. It was signed by Danny and supported by statements from 6 other firefighters who claimed Rebecca was too strict, too inflexible, and was punishing people who didn't fall in line with her way of doing things. Torres came to her office that afternoon, the complaint in his hand. His face was red, his jaw set. "Chief, we need to talk about this." "I know it's your nephew," Rebecca said before he could continue. "And I know this puts you in a difficult position." "That's not what I'm here about." Torres dropped into the chair across from her desk. "Danny's statements are exaggerated, but he's not entirely wrong about one thing. The crew thinks you're coming down too hard, too fast. They were bypassing safety protocols, Torres. The same kind of shortcuts that get firefighters killed. I'm not defending what they did. They deserve to be disciplined." He leaned forward. "But suspensions without pay? For a first offense? That's harsh by any standard. It's by the book. The book gives you discretion. Written warnings, additional training, extra duties. You had options." Rebecca felt her temper rising but kept her voice level. "Those options work when people make honest mistakes. These weren't mistakes. They were deliberately cutting corners and teaching new firefighters to do the same. That's dangerous, and it stops now." Torres was quiet for a moment. "You're not wrong," he finally said. "But you're also not making friends. Half the crew thinks you're trying to prove something, trying to show everyone you're tougher than any man who's held this job. I don't care what they think. I care about keeping them alive. I know that. But they don't. Not all of them. And now Danny's using this complaint to make you look bad. He's got the union rep involved, talking to other stations, making noise. This could turn into a real problem." Rebecca rubbed her temples. She'd known the suspensions would cause waves, but she hadn't expected a full complaint. "What do you suggest?" "Fight it. Show the commission your documentation, your reasoning. The facts are on your side." Torres stood to leave, then paused at the door. "But Rebecca, you need to know something. This complaint has given your critics ammunition. There's going to be a commission hearing next week. They're going to question your judgment, your leadership style, and some people are going to use this as proof that you're not ready for this job." After he left, Rebecca sat alone in her office, staring at the complaint. She'd spent 15 years proving herself, and somehow it was never enough. There was always another test, another challenge, another group of people who needed convincing that she belonged. The next few days were tense. Word of the complaint spread through the department like wildfire. Some firefighters avoided her. Others whispered when she walked past. The crew at Station 47 split into camps, those who supported her and those who thought she'd overreacted. The breaking point came during a department-wide meeting about updated safety standards. Rebecca was presenting new protocols when Danny stood up in the back of the room, interrupting her. Question, Chief. These new standards, are they actually about safety, or are they about you showing off, making a name for yourself as the chief who changed everything? The room went silent. Every eye turned to Rebecca. These standards are based on best practices from departments across the country, Rebecca said evenly. They're designed to reduce injuries and save lives. Or maybe they're designed to make the rest of us look bad so you look good, Danny shot back. Seems like everything's changed since you got here. More rules, more paperwork, more people getting in trouble for stuff we've always done. Danny, Torres warned from his seat. But Danny was on a roll now, angry and emboldened by the other firefighters watching. And you know what else? We're all still waiting for you to make good on that piano challenge. Remember? You said later. Well, it's later. Or can't you actually play? Just another thing you talk about but can't deliver? A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the room. Rebecca felt heat rise in her face, but she kept her expression neutral. This isn't the time or place for that discussion, she said. Why not? You're always talking about accountability, about following through. So follow through, or admit you can't. Torres stood up. That's enough, firefighter. Sit down. But the damage was done. The meeting dissolved into murmurs and side conversations. Rebecca powered through the rest of her presentation. But nobody was really listening anymore. That evening, she drove to the hospital to visit Jake Miller, a young firefighter from Station 47 who'd been injured during a routine call the week before. A ceiling collapse had broken his leg and given him a concussion. He'd been out of work recovering, missing all the drama at the station. She found him in his room, leg elevated, watching TV. His face lit up when he saw her. Chief, you didn't have to come by. Wanted to check on you. How's the leg? Hurts like hell, but the doctors say I'll be back in 6 weeks. He muted the TV. How are things at the station? Rebecca hesitated, then decided to be honest. Complicated. Yeah, I heard about Danny's complaint. My girlfriend keeps me updated on all the gossip. Jake shifted in his bed, wincing slightly. For what it's worth, Chief, you did the right thing. Danny and those guys, they've been cutting corners for years. Somebody needed to call them on it. Not everyone agrees with you. Not everyone matters. Jake looked at her seriously. Chief, I was there that night at the warehouse fire. I was on one of the defensive teams. I watched you work. Watched how you coordinated everything, how you put yourself in danger to protect the rest of us. That's leadership. That's what this department needs. Rebecca felt unexpected emotion rise in her throat. Thank you, Jake. That means a lot. My dad was a firefighter, Jake continued. Retired now, but he taught me something when I first joined. He said the best chiefs are the ones who scare you a little, because they care more about you surviving than about you liking them. You scare some people, Chief. That's how I know you're good at this. After she left the hospital, Rebecca sat in her car for a long time thinking. Jake's words had struck something deep. She'd been so focused on proving herself, on showing everyone she could do this job, that she'd forgotten why she was doing it in the first place. It wasn't about her. It was about keeping people like Jake safe, about preventing the kind of tragedy that had destroyed her own life. By the time she drove back to the station, it was nearly 9 at night. Most of the crew would be settling in for the evening, watching TV or playing cards. She should have gone home, gotten rest before the commission hearing next week, but instead she found herself walking into the station, up the stairs to her office. Torres was still there, working late on paperwork. He looked surprised to see her. Thought you'd gone home. Need to prepare for the hearing, Rebecca said. And Torres, I need to talk to you about something. What's on your mind? That piano challenge. It's become a problem, a distraction. And after what Danny said today, I think we need to address it directly. Torres frowned. You don't have to prove anything to Danny or anyone else. This isn't about proving anything. It's about clearing the air, about stopping this from being a weapon people use against me. Rebecca took a breath. I want to do it. Tomorrow night after shift change, I'll play. Rebecca, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do. But there's something you need to understand first. She sat down across from him. I can play that piano. I can play it better than Danny or anyone else in this department could possibly imagine. But playing it is going to reveal things about my past that I've kept private for a very long time. Torres waited, listening. I kept it private because I didn't want people to see me differently. Didn't want them to think about who I used to be instead of who I am now. But maybe that was a mistake. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. What do you need from me? Just be there. And whatever happens afterward, whatever people say or think, I need to know my deputy chief still has my back. Torres stood and extended his hand. You have my word, Chief. Whatever comes, I'm with you. Rebecca shook his hand, feeling some of the weight lift from her shoulders. She'd made her decision. Tomorrow night she would sit at that dusty piano in the common room, and she would show them all exactly who she was. But first, she needed to spread the word. By morning, every firefighter in the city would know about the challenge. The new chief was finally going to play the piano, and Deputy Chief Torres had promised to quit if she could really do it. Rebecca went home that night and sat at her own piano. Her fingers rested on the keys, and for the first time in months she began to play. Not tentatively, not carefully, but with the full force of everything she'd once been and everything she'd become. The music filled her small apartment, spilling out through the windows into the night. She played for her mother. She played for her younger self. She played for every person who'd ever doubted her. And she played for tomorrow, when she would finally stop running from her past and let everyone see the whole truth. The notes soared and crashed like waves, like fire, like all the beauty and pain of a life remade from ashes. And as she played, Rebecca Chen smiled. Let them see, she thought. Let them all see. Word spread faster than Rebecca expected. By noon the next day, firefighters from stations across the city were talking about it. The new chief was finally going to play the piano. Torres had renewed his promise to quit if she could really do it. What had started as a private challenge had become a public spectacle. Rebecca spent the day in meetings, reviewing reports, doing her normal work. But everyone who saw her knew what was coming that evening. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with anticipation. A few seemed almost sorry for her, as if they knew she was walking into an ambush. At 6:30, she returned to Station 47 after her last meeting. The parking lot was packed with cars she didn't recognize. Firefighters from at least a dozen different stations had shown up. Some claimed they were just passing by. Others were more honest about coming to watch. Inside, the common room was crowded with over 100 people. They lined the walls, sat on every available surface, spilled out into the hallways. Someone had cleaned the piano, removed the old station flag draped over it, dusted the keys. It sat in the corner like a challenge, like a judgment, like a door to a past Rebecca had locked away. Torres stood near the piano, his face unreadable. Danny was in the back with his supporters, arms crossed, wearing a smirk. Jake Miller had checked himself out of the hospital against doctor's orders and sat in a chair near the front, his broken leg propped up. Even some city officials were there, word having reached them about the unusual situation. A local news crew had somehow gotten wind of it and stood in the back with a camera. Rebecca saw all of this as she entered, and for a moment she almost turned around and walked out. This wasn't what she'd intended. This wasn't supposed to be a circus. But then she saw the faces of her crew from Station 47. Some looked worried for her. Others looked hopeful. They were watching to see what kind of person their chief really was. And Rebecca realized that this moment was bigger than Danny's challenge, bigger than Torres's promise. This was about truth, about showing people that everyone carries scars. Everyone has a story. And strength comes from embracing all of who you are, not just the parts that fit comfortably. She walked through the crowd to the piano. The room fell silent except for the shuffling of feet and the creak of someone shifting their weight. Rebecca removed her uniform jacket and hung it on a nearby chair. She sat on the piano bench, adjusted her position, and let her hands rest on the keys. The keys felt strange and familiar at the same time. Different from her piano at home, the action heavier, the tone probably out of tune, but it was a real piano, and her fingers remembered what to do even after all these years. Before I play, Rebecca said, her voice carrying through the silent room, I want to tell you something. Most of you know me as Chief Chen. You know my service record, my certifications, my experience. But there's a part of my life you don't know about. A part I've kept private because it was too painful to share. She looked down at her left hand, at the scars barely visible along her forearm where her uniform sleeve ended. When I was 17 years old, I was preparing to attend the Juilliard School of Music in New York. I'd won international piano competitions. Critics called me a prodigy. Playing piano wasn't just something I did. It was everything I was. Everything I'd worked for since I was 5 years old. The room was completely still now. Even Danny had lost his smirk. That same year, a fire broke out in my apartment building. My mother died in that fire. I tried to run into the building after her, and firefighters pulled me back. In the chaos, I was burned. 3rd-degree burns on my left arm and hand. The physical damage healed, but the nerve damage was permanent. I lost the fine motor control required to play at a professional level. My career as a concert pianist ended before it really began. Rebecca looked up, meeting the eyes of people in the crowd. That fire destroyed my first dream, but it also gave me a second one. Those firefighters who pulled me back from the flames, who tried to save my mother, who held me while I fell apart. They showed me what real heroism looks like. I wanted to be like them. So I joined the department, worked my way up, and dedicated my life to preventing what happened to me from happening to anyone else. She turned back to the piano, her fingers finding their positions on the keys. I haven't played in public since I was 17, not because I can't, but because playing reminds me of everything I lost. But tonight I'm going to play for my mother, who sacrificed everything so I could have a chance at my dreams. I'm going to play for every firefighter who's ever run toward danger instead of away from it. And I'm going to play for all of you, because you deserve to know the whole truth about who I am. Rebecca took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and began to play. She'd chosen Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most technically demanding pieces ever written. Her hands moved across the keys, the left hand weaving complex bass patterns while the right hand sang out the melody. The opening was gentle, almost tentative, like someone remembering how to speak after a long silence. Then the music built. Her fingers flew across the keys with impossible speed and precision. The damaged nerves in her left hand protested, sending small jolts of pain up her arm. But Rebecca played through it. The music poured out of her like water breaking through a dam, 20 years of silence ending in a cascade of notes that filled every corner of the room. The piece was 10 minutes long, moving through passages of thundering power and moments of heartbreaking beauty. Rebecca played it all from memory, her body swaying slightly with the music, her face a mixture of concentration and release. This wasn't just technical skill. This was emotion made audible, pain and hope and loss and triumph all woven together in sound. The scars on her hand ached. Her fingers didn't move quite as smoothly as they once had. There were a few notes that weren't perfect, small imperfections that only a trained ear would catch. But the overall performance was stunning. The kind of playing that reminded people why music matters, why beauty matters, why some things are worth sacrificing everything for. When she finished, the final notes hung in the air for a long moment, then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Rebecca opened her eyes and looked out at the crowd. Many had tears running down their faces. Jake Miller was crying openly. Torres stood with his hand over his mouth, shaking his head in disbelief. Then someone started clapping. Just one person at first, then another. Then suddenly the entire room erupted in applause. People were standing, shouting, whistling. The ovation went on and on, waves of sound washing over Rebecca as she sat at the piano, overwhelmed. A veteran firefighter named Carlos pushed his way to the front, holding up his phone. "Chief," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "I looked you up." Rebecca Chen, Van Cliburn Junior competition winner at age 12. There are videos of you online from back then. Articles calling you one of the most talented young pianists in America. He turned his phone to show the crowd, and Rebecca saw her 12-year-old self on the screen, playing in a concert hall, her mother visible in the audience with tears streaming down her face. The information rippled through the crowd. People pulled out their own phones, searching, finding articles and videos about the young prodigy who disappeared from the music world after a family tragedy. Danny had gone pale. He pushed through the crowd and stopped in front of Rebecca, looking down at his feet. "Chief, he started, then stopped. "I didn't know. I'm sorry. The complaint, the things I said, I was completely out of line." Rebecca stood up from the piano bench. "Danny, you were right about one thing. I have been hard on you and the others, not because I'm trying to prove something or show off, but because I know what happens when people take shortcuts with fire safety. I know what it costs, and I won't lose anyone the way I lost my mother, not if I can prevent it." "I understand that now," Danny said quietly. "I'd like to withdraw my complaint if that's possible." "We'll talk about it Monday," Rebecca said. But Danny, the suspension stands. You broke safety protocols and there have to be consequences. What I will do is work with you afterward. Make sure you understand not just the rules but why they matter. Can you accept that? Danny nodded, then surprised her by extending his hand. They shook and the room erupted in applause again. Torres walked over, and for a moment Rebecca thought he might actually be preparing to resign. But instead he smiled. Chief, I made a promise. I said if you could really play that piano, I'd quit. And you can really play. He paused for effect. But I'm asking you to release me from that promise. Because after tonight, after seeing who you really are and what you've overcome, I realize I don't want to quit. I want to stay and learn from you. I want to be part of what you're building here. Rebecca felt tears forming in her eyes. I'd be honored to have you stay, Deputy Chief Torres. They shook hands and Torres pulled her into a brief hug. The room exploded with cheering. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Firefighters came up to shake Rebecca's hand, to thank her for sharing her story, to apologize for doubting her. The news crew got their footage. The city officials saw something they hadn't expected. A leader who was both strong and vulnerable, accomplished and humble. Around midnight, after everyone had left, Rebecca stood alone in the common room looking at the piano. Torres walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this, he said, handing her one. Thanks. Rebecca took a sip. That was not how I expected tonight to go. You opened up to them, showed them your scars, literally and figuratively. That takes more courage than running into any burning building. My mother used to say that true strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about breaking and putting yourself back together into something even stronger. She sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. Rebecca looked at the piano again. I think I might start playing again. Not professionally, but here at the station. Maybe teach some of the younger firefighters if they're interested. I think they'd love that, Chief. Rebecca turned to him with a slight smile. You know what the funny thing is? All this time I've been trying to prove I belong here. Trying to earn respect through my work and my decisions. But it wasn't until I stopped hiding and showed everyone who I really am, scars and all, that I finally felt like I actually belonged. That's because respect isn't just about what you can do, Torres said. It's about who you are. And now we all know. You're not just our chief. You're someone who lost everything and chose to rebuild her life by protecting others. That's the kind of person we want to follow into fires. They stood together in comfortable silence. 2 people who'd started as adversaries and had become true partners. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Somewhere, an alarm would sound. Somewhere, firefighters would rush toward danger. And now, leading them was a woman who understood both the beauty worth preserving and the cost of losing it. Rebecca Chen had finally come home.